Welcome to the People by People podcast with me, your host, Laura Sutherland. I'm really pleased to be joined by Helen Jane Campbell today. Helen is a business and life coach, and she is also now an author. Welcome to the podcast, Helen.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thanks for having me on, and thank you for calling me an author. This is a new title that I'm getting used to as I've just completed my first book after 3 years of pain. It's now gone off to the publishers to be printed, and I'm really excited to have a tangible product in my hands in a couple of weeks' time.
Yay, congratulations. That's brilliant news.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, well, it's basically, I think when this podcast goes out, your book will be coming out. So first and center, just tell people, where can they get your book? Well, what's it called and where can they get it?
I'm so glad you asked, because I probably do the whole interview and forget to actually tell you what the book's called. That would be a very me thing to do. So it's called Founders, Freelancers and Rebels.
Yeah.
How to Thrive as an Independent Creative. And this came from the fact that having run my own businesses, worked for myself, worked for other people, then I sort of started to attract others who said, oh, you've done this thing, you've set up on, like, you probably had this when you set up your business. I started working for myself more than a decade ago, and people started coming to me going, can I chat to you about that? Like, what's it like? What did you have to do? How did you get there?
Yeah.
And I used to give people very informal advice, in the pub, about what it was like.
For a glass of wine.
Exactly. And then I kind of got this reputation for being somebody to go to. If you were creative and you were thinking about going it alone, they'd sort of sent people to me, the ones that had the beer with me in the pub. They'd be like, oh, I'm going to send my friend to you because it was quite useful what you told me. You gave me a real insight into what it's like to work for yourself, especially if you're creative. And so I used to do that as a bit of a sideline, usually for free, which is the opposite of what I would encourage people to do now. I've learned a bit more about it, but I really felt that then not only did these people gravitate towards me, but I started gravitating to others who were independent and who had chosen their own path. And I found that very inspiring. Having started, when I started my PR career, then I was on one of these graduate training schemes, which was incredible. But I was in an insurance company on a graduate training scheme, and there is a certain restrictiveness about what you should wear and how you should speak and the language that you should use, and we literally had to clock in and clock out. In a way, that's probably the most restrictive you can get, for all that I absolutely adored my experience there. And so I've seen both sides of the coin. So the book very much comes from the perspective of, I know what it's like to be in the system, and I know what it's like to be out of the system. And here's what I've learned. Here's the best of both worlds. Here's how you can make money and do what you want. Yeah, I'm talking to you from Hay on Wye, the famous book town, and sadly all the bookshops are closed at the moment here in Wales, no. As they will be in lots of other parts of the country. So just can't wait for them to open back up again when it's safe to do so.
Yeah, definitely. So just kind of rewinding for people here to give them a bit of perspective. So I first met you through a Facebook group you started called Freelance PRs. And you started that when you yourself were a freelance PR practitioner, and you wanted to connect with other people and just have a bit of a chat with them and share stuff, which was awesome. And it's now grown into a fantastic group, which is now run by Nigel at the PR Cavalry. But you have now changed, obviously, from being a practitioner into a coach. What made you change?
Such a good question. And I set up that group, I think it was more than 10 years ago, because I was lonely. It's so funny that it's become this group. There's thousands of people on there, and it's such a great community. And the idea that when I set it up, I was just sitting there. I think I might have been living, I don't know if I was living in Essex at the time, maybe, and I didn't know anybody. And I was literally like, is there anyone out there? Does anyone else work for themselves? And I thought maybe, I might get 10 people on there, and there's thousands. And it's such an incredible resource, so reassuring. But what made me change, it's really interesting. It was one of my clients, actually.
Oh, wow.
I don't know about you, but I get the sense you probably do this as well. So whenever I work with a new client when I was running PR agencies and running PR teams and consulting as a sort of, you know, PR interim, then I'd always really get into the detail and live the experience of whatever it was the client did. And if it got to the point where I wasn't enjoying that, I knew it wasn't a client for me. So it would be a bit of a litmus test in that way. So I did Kung Fu classes because I took on a Kung Fu master as a client, and wine tasting. You know, I mean, sometimes you have to take one for the team and do these difficult things like wine tasting. I've done some brew days. I've worked with breweries. And the one client that really, really affected me and actually changed my career, I don't know if they know this, I should probably tell them, was a charity called Youth at Risk, which they've rebranded. They're now called Grit, but it used to be called Youth at Risk. And they work with young people who are not in education or employment or training. And they really help them turn their lives around, whatever they're facing, whatever background they've come from. It's basically young people, I think, aged 18 to 25, that sort of age. It was a few years ago, so I can't quite remember. But if they're at a crossroads, they don't know what they're going to do with their lives, they use coaching very powerfully and very intensively to show these young people that they can do whatever they want in life, whether they want to become a musician or a scientist or whatever it is. And often they're working with young people who really haven't had the chances, who've faced all sorts of hardships, and to have that focus, to have an adult really hear them and really listen to them and stick with them on the journey. And I saw how it really turned around the lives of these young people. And I kind of got the bug for it. And it was, I mean, even in the meetings, the staff meetings, people would be talking about so many feelings, and they'd be crying in the staff meetings. I'd never seen anything like it. And there was almost always crying in the staff meetings. I was kind of like, I come from a PR background.
It's powerful. It's powerful.
So powerful.
It's transforming. And I think people, people like, me as well included, because I mean, I love mentoring people, and I love, there's an element of the coaching that I do with my mentees as well. It's just, you want to help people, don't you? You want to, it's like something that's inbuilt into you. I don't think anyone could do it if they didn't want to do it, if they weren't passionate about it. That's right. And at the same time, and you know this from mentoring, the coaching, whether it's with those young people or whether it's with the founders that I work with, it's peer to peer. It's not about, and I think that's what was really impactful for those young people as well. It's being taken seriously, not being patronized. Nobody was saying, you know, I'm in charge and you have to do what I say. It's like, what do you want to do? It's led by the coachee or the mentee. And that authenticity, which is something that, you know, we said we would really delve into today, that authenticity of sitting in staff meetings where people were really sharing their emotions and then moving forward. So it wasn't a kind of, when I say there was crying in the meetings, it wasn't like we were going to the meetings and people were falling apart and not making progress. They'd say, I'm dealing with something really, really hard right now. This is how it makes me feel. And this is what I'm going to do about it. And they would look for support from everybody else in the room. And everyone had come in with their ideas, their support, see how they could help, how we could collaborate. And then we'd make a plan and move forward, which is essentially what coaching is, to be heard. Because you're identifying the challenge and you're collaboratively coming up with the solution to it, and you're there hand-holding essentially to take that person through it. I went on holiday to Sri Lanka, which was lovely. I went to a yoga retreat at Soul and Surf. I realized I'm very privileged to be able to do that. And I had coaching out there, and having that perspective as well of being in a different environment, you really get the chance to reflect on your life and on what you want. And so I've been constantly, you know, for the last few years, constantly training. I mean, I know you're a firm believer in constantly training. So it's not, I wouldn't say I trained as a coach and now I'm coaching. I say I am always going to be training continuously. But I think everyone has to. Nobody knows everything, especially at the way that things are, you know, the rate things are developing just now. Right. Like we constantly have to be evolving. I think so. And I feel like with coaching, people talk about having a specialism, and they do with PR as well, is whether you sort of specialize in education or food and drink or whatever it is. What I've found
and this comes back to the authenticity and the purpose point that we were sort of speaking about before we started recording, which is my niche, if I have one, is being able to talk about the subjects that people just don't normally talk about. So I've found in the coaching conversations with my clients, we've talked about neurodiversity, we've talked about sexuality, we've talked about money, both having lots of it and not having any of it. And, you know, at both ends of the scale, it's a taboo subject. Whichever side you're on, it's not necessarily talked about. And I grew up in South Wales, and people didn't talk. It wasn't polite to ask how much somebody earned, or to talk about money. It wasn't polite to talk about sexuality. It wasn't polite to talk about religion or race. So everything was repressed.
And it's difficult for people to open up about stuff like that unless they feel safe.
Yes.
In a safe environment.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And part of coaching is to create that safe environment. And of course, you say at the beginning of every session, yes, it's confidential. And of course it is, but it's more than that. It's more than just saying, oh yeah, go for it now. Tell me everything. Like, you've got to build that rapport. And so I'm constantly building that rapport with my clients. And as I grow and develop and learn more, then that I'm able to hold more, you know, more powerful ideas and more powerful thoughts, and I'm able to hold more emotions or more money. You know, what if somebody, maybe on day one, if somebody came in and said, right, I'm about to raise a few million for my business, I'm not sure I would have been able to hold that conversation, but now I feel like, yeah, bring it on. I'm there for that conversation. I really am.
Yeah, authenticity in our industry is, we're seeing more of it now. I think we're definitely seeing more of it, but I still think there's a long way to go.
I always talk about show, don't tell. You know, it's no good saying, right, you bring me all your stuff and I'm just going to stay the same. Or at the same time, you can't bring your own stuff to people's coaching sessions. So I need to find ways to show who I am that's appropriate, but also shows my authenticity. And so the way that I do that, whether it's, you know, obviously I've written the book and there's a lot of me in there, as well as it's a collection of really fascinating and inspiring people's insights and thoughts. And it covers everything from David McAdam Freud, who's one of Lucian Freud's sons, who's a painter, who talks about self-actualization tendency, which I'm so excited to have him in there, and Alex Myers from Manifest, talking about, you know, how he set up the business as sort of one man sitting on the sofa and won the Brewdog account. And, you know, there's some real authenticity in the book. And at the same time, I don't want to just sit there and expect everyone else to bear all and not actually reciprocate some things.
One of the other things that we had talked about, which I just love, was curiosity. And I talk a lot about being curious because I ask a lot of questions. I'm curious about everything. And, you know, like we're talking about earlier, you have to be curious about your client work, or if you're in-house, you have to be curious about every element of the organization, so that you have that 360-degree view. You know, it's also a trait that I would probably say that entrepreneurs all have. And many years ago, I blogged about why PR people should have entrepreneurial spirit, because if we're curious and if we're, you know, we're happy to test ideas and think outside of the box, as people most commonly say, I think, you know, that type of opportunity for public relations practitioners is huge. But many are too scared to take that leap, to break the mold of, but the client only expects me to write a press release or write copy. And I'm kind of thinking, but there are opportunities. You need to be suggesting more exciting things to do, you know, kind of relating obviously back to the strategy, but go in there and give it some gusto.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that word gusto. And I love not just the word curiosity, but your genuine curiosity. There's something about being liked that gets in our way. It gets in all of our, you know, as founders, it gets in all of our way. We want to be liked, and we want our clients to warm to us, and we kind of want to be friends with them to a certain extent. You know, professionally, we want to be friends with our clients, but to sit in the uncomfortable space and to risk not being liked, and to have that curiosity to ask questions that might not go down very well. They might not land very well. They might sound insulting. They might raise a topic that the client desperately doesn't wish to talk about, which is almost certainly exactly the conversation we need to have. And that sort of curiosity is when, you know, we talk about providing strategic counsel rather than being a doer, to go, you know, being a minion to go and write a press release. And of course, yes, we will write press releases in our PR careers, but as you know, there's so much more behind that. And I think something that I talk about in coaching, and that I talk about in the book as well, is we need to find other ways to top up our batteries. If we rely on our clients liking us to top up our batteries, we're never going to be able to go and have those difficult conversations and be curious about the awkward stuff, because we're so bothered about them not liking us that we're working on the surface level. So that's why it sounds like a really funny stretch between, like, that's why I do life drawing. It's like because we were talking about that before we started recording, but
tedious link in video one springs to mind.
It's like a tedious link. So I'm going to try and not laugh too much, because if I get the giggles, I won't be able to talk. But so we top up our batteries through doing things like swimming, drawing, dancing, chatting to our friends, things, real life things that we used to be allowed to do before COVID. Mm-hmm. But we top up our batteries in other ways. And it might be through quiet activities, it might be through meditation or yoga, it might be through getting enough hours sleep or reading a book or whatever it is. And then we come to the client session with that curiosity, ready to go into those really uncomfortable spaces, feeling very topped up and very loved by our friends and our peers, so that we don't need the client to like us. And ultimately, they'll probably like us more because we'll ask those questions. Yeah.
It's literally about our own public relations. So our relationships with our clients, building that trust with them, so they trust that what you're asking is acceptable and there's a point to it, and that you can actually help them. So you're actually problem solving. And yeah, I mean, there's some clients that you know, if you know that you're going to go into a situation and you're going to have to ask some tough questions, and that person's ego is going to get in the way, I probably wouldn't be working with them.
Humour it can be such a great leveler, and I can ask really uncomfortable questions when there's humour present, because I can either challenge somebody in a way and say, look, I know you're going to really hate me for asking this, and you know, I know I've asked you this 100 times before, but you still haven't done the creds document that you said that you wanted to do, and that was going to be important for you to be able to pitch for new clients. And we can have a joke and a laugh about it and about people's tendencies and patterns, but I'm definitely aware of, you know, consciously bringing playfulness and my personality into my work in a way that I spent probably all of my 20s covering up my playfulness, covering up my authenticity, and trying to be if you've ever seen the Stepford Wives, you know, the original one, it's super scary, trying to be like a Stepford wife press officer.
Do you think that those, and this comes back to, actually I was talking the other day in the International Women's Day piece that I'd submitted, someone asked me to submit a blog, and one of the things I'd said that when I was younger in public relations, my supposed role models or the older female PR directors were those people that dressed in the pinstripe suits, that had the power shoulders and the bright red lipstick and the whatever, and they didn't, it wasn't like they made you feel like you could be yourself. No. They wanted you to be stereotypical.
It's almost like our bodies we're being encouraged to become uniform. It's kind of like that word uniform, you know, it has much more meaning that they're trying to make us the same. And I kind of do the opposite work with my clients, saying, hey, you got out, congratulations, now let's find out what's different about you, or even I probably wouldn't use this word in a coaching session, but what's weird about you. Like I feel like my weirdness is my superpower, and my quirkiness and my uniqueness, and that's what people often end up tuning into when they come to think about their purpose and what drives them and what helps them get up every morning. It's often the things that were squashed out of them in the corporate workplace. And I'm not saying all workplaces are like that, and I'm not saying all corporates are bad or anything like that, but some of us don't fit in a box. Most of us don't fit in a box, And to me, the clue around what your unique selling point or your purpose or your niche is, not saying those things are interchangeable, but they all sort of come into play. The clue is often in the things that we got told off for if we were in a corporate office.
Yeah, I mean, so much of what you just said there, I speak a lot about when I'm talking about personal brand, working with like my sort of, I call them private clients, on their own professional progression, whether they're going for board positions or whether they need to make a mark in their agencies or organizations. And there's so much that you kind of have to look to about that person's personality and that individual person. And PR Fest last year was all about people being individual people, not just collectively PR practitioners coming to an event. It was, you are all individuals. And one of the things I always say is you are you, and that is your superpower, just like you said. But too often, particularly in the stereotypical PR land, these things have been sort of you are this person and this is how you should act and speak and what you should wear and stuff, and that's not culture. That's not good culture. You're not attracting the right people to your business. You're not going to be having, obviously, diversity and inclusion as part of that as well. And the whole thing just kind of sits badly when people don't consider people as individuals.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously I work mainly with founders, but this is not just about founders or freelancers. I think everybody has we don't have to dig a tunnel out of our employment in order to be able to be authentic. But what we do need to do is find a squad of others that are going to celebrate our differences and our uniqueness and support us, because being a lonely voice and being the only one, it feels about like the emperor's new clothes. The other thing is being ready to notice when I make a mistake or when I get on the wrong foot. There's if you're authentic, then that works both ways. It's not about putting out this bold, confident personality and not taking any feedback. It almost invites more. It invites more feedback in to go out and be authentic. So in order to be able to do that, we need to kind of arm ourselves a bit. So if we don't have the armor of the pinstripe suit, or we don't have the armor of maybe working for a massive organization, so we're going out on our own, we're choosing, what do I stand for? What's my purpose? What's my why? How do I dress? How do I talk to my clients? We're creating all of that from scratch. That's a lot. That is a lot to not just come up with, but once you come up with, we're all going to have days where we're just not feeling it. I might say, right, I'm going to be this playful, joyful person, and I might wake up with really bad PMT and a headache and think, I'm not ready to be that version of myself today. So part of what I talk about in the book and what I talk about with all my clients when I'm coaching is building your squad. Who do you need to support you, or what do you need to support you to be able to be authentic and show up? And sometimes that might be sort of taking some time, taking some space. It might be hiring a coach. It might be hiring a mentor, a PR person, whatever it is. And also having this squad of peers. And I know you're really good at this. You tune in a lot to other people in your network and in the industry. And it's not like it's not like I'm in competition with all the other coaches. I have plenty of coaches that I check in with. I have my own coach that I pay to see her 3 times a month, who's incredible. I also check in with a lot of other coaches. How's it going? How's business? What do you do about this situation? Just kind of having that peer network as you do, and you do it on a grand scale where you actually have a festival for your network, which is incredible. It's really, really important to have those other cheerleaders. And for me, it's kind of like finding other weirdos, because I think I am a bit of a weirdo in the nicest possible way. So finding the other quirky people, being able to hold each other to account as well to a certain point. I have my friend Becky, who's a copywriter, and she works in the film industry and writing scripts and so on. She's incredible, and we have a call every Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'll laugh and we'll joke, but we'll call each other out as well. One of us might say, "Oh, I said this one in a client pitch the other day." I'd be like, "Did you really?" What were you thinking, kind of thing. And she's really good at just being a friend, but also being a little bit challenging and saying, do you think that really went down very well, that thing that you said? And I think that with that authenticity, it comes, it's like Brené Brown obviously talks about vulnerability. There's a lot of self-reflection to do as well around what you're putting out and how you're showing up. And that's
the
hard.
only way you can grow. And I think if you can take constructive feedback and use that, like properly use it, then you know you can continue to grow.
And somebody that I interviewed for the book is Rachel Picken, who runs Agile PR, and I love what she's done there with taking the agile way of working has come from the software industry, and that's how people create apps and so on, and she's taken that agile methodology into her PR work, and I just find that really refreshing. And I talk a lot to people about minimum viable product, and I love her 80% awesome, the idea that we can't all be 100% every day, and her real openness really, really inspired me, because you can be both. You can be messy and you can be unsure, and you can be vulnerable and you can be authentic, and you can also be an incredible professional. It's possible to hold those things, and I think Rachel does it beautifully, because she'll talk really openly about, spent the whole day in bed, but equally she'll be like, yes, and I also flew to, I don't know, Venice or something to give this massive presentation at this conference back when we were able to do that. And she was somebody that really showed me, I think she's a great role model, in the sense of being able to be both an impressive businesswoman and an authentic, down-to-earth human who has bad days. And the more of us that there are, then I think the easier it's going to be to set that as a template rather than as something that's unusual.
There's some really great people in the industry, and I think if you look at you mentioned Rachel. I know Rachel, Shioni Lynn PR, who uses nudge and behavioral science. Like, there are people that are using non-PR strategy and tactical solutions and approaches to achieve some really great things. And I think that's what's making our industry more progressive, and makes I would say probably makes other people that are inquisitive to go and search for what their thing is, so that USP can be developed further. It's just we have so much of an opportunity in our industry. It's incredible. Helen, we have talked about so much today. I don't know how I'm going to edit all this down, but thank you so much for coming on to People by People to talk about your book and some of the content within it. Tell us where we can find you if we want to find out more information about the book or get in touch.
Absolutely. So I've got a Facebook group called Founders, Freelancers and Rebels, which is also the name of the book. You're very welcome to join that. My website is coachingbyhelen.com.
Perfect.
And I'll also give you, Laura, I have a nice little 20% discount from my distributors, which is Campbell20, which is what you can redeem on Eurospan, but I'll email you that as well if you want to.
Oh, perfect. I'll put that in the show notes then. Excellent. Thanks again, Helen, for your time, and you're definitely being an inspiration. I do hope that people start to think outside of that box, because there's a lot of opportunity.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. I've had a blast. Thank you. Take care.
Well, that's all we've got time for from the People by People podcast in this episode with Helen Jane Campbell. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, and just a discussion that might actually be quite generally be useful for you. Don't forget to leave a review if you can, please. Also, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe, because then you can get the next episodes directly to your favourite app. And also, thank you so much for tuning in. It means so much that people actually listen to what I'm producing. Even if it helps one person, I'm happy. So thanks so much, and I will be back very soon with another episode.